Congratulations, so far you have built a RESTful API and a web app client to interact with that API. Now it's time to build a tool for admins of this application. And rather than building another web app, we're going to build this as a command line tool, a CLI. To break that down, that means this will be a program that you interact with as a user or as an admin entirely from the command line. You enter your inputs into the command line, you receive outputs from the application at the command line, aka the console. All the interaction with this application will be via the command line. So we will use Node.js to build this command line tool, and we're going to build it in a very different way than we've built the application so far. When we were building the RESTful API, we created it using something analogous to a functional pattern, where requests would come into the API, we would assign it to a handler, that handler would call back to the original process, etc. The command line tool is going to be built differently. Rather than using a functional design pattern, we are going to use an event-driven design pattern. That means every time a user puts an input into the console, for the application to read, that is going to emit an event. And one function or multiple functions in the application could be bound to the calling of that event and can respond accordingly, writing to the console anything that they want to write, or just performing some process that they need to perform in response to a given input. That will make a lot more sense as we go. We are going to be building this application so that it can respond to a number of different requests from the user. The first request is going to be the command exit. If a user types exit, we simply want to kill the application. The next command is going to be man, which is the conventional command line input if you want help. But the user could also just type the word help. The next command we want to support is called stats. When user writes the word stats, we want to be able to respond with everything that we know about the current operating system, its performance, its load, etc. The next command is going to be list users. When a user types list users, we want to simply write out line by line every user in the system back to the console. But let's say that we are an admin, but we want to know more information about one specific user on the list. For that, we're going to support the next command, which is more user info dash and then an ID. So if they list users, they get an ID, then they can type more user info and then an ID. Doing so will print out everything that we know about that specific user and that specific user's object. The next command is called list checks. Listing checks will allow the user to see all of the checks that have been created by all of the users in the system. But we will also allow admins to use two flags, -down or -up. That will narrow their results to only the down checks, the checks that are currently down, or the up checks, the checks that are currently up. We then want to allow an admin to write more check info and include the ID of a specific check. That will give them back the entire check object so that they can see all the details about this check that has been created in the system without having to rummage through the data stored themselves. The next command we want to support is list logs. When you say list logs, we will list out line by line all of the logs in the system. And just like before, we want to allow a user to say more log info and then an ID of a specific log. If they want more information about a log that hasn't been compressed, we will simply print out the contents of that log for them. If they want more information about a log that has been compressed, we need to decompress that log and then write the contents of that log out to the console for the user. So that is all the commands that we want to support with this command line application. As I mentioned, we're going to be building it in an event-driven way, which is a semi-functional. It's not like this isn't a functional design pattern. It's just an event-driven design pattern, which is a bit of a subset of functional design. But as a result, you will be learning to use the event emitter, learning how to bind to your own events, etc. So without further ado, let's get started.